You mentioned the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that is the last area I want to cover with you briefly. How much the Russian aggression against Ukraine is going to change Europe? My feeling is, even in relation to France and Germany, in the question of power, I don't know whether we can still say that Germany is somehow stronger than France, which that truism implies. Because when you think of hard power,
Yeah.
if you think of military capabilities,
Yeah.
France is a superpower. It has nuclear weapons.
Sure.
While Germany continues to be very uneasy about deployment, the possibility of deploying hard power.
Yes.
And that is reflected also in relation to Russia, to Ukraine.
Yeah.
What is your take on how much Europe is changing because of the war?
First of all,
and
indeed,
does it need to become a state, as many people would say, precisely because it faces the challenge of a more aggressive, assertive Russia in the east?
Well, first of all, indeed, the German sort of relationship to hard power is obviously influenced by its history. So, of course, we were the nation that sort of brought death over Europe in the Second World War. And we, the basic law, that's, by the way, celebrating its 75th birthday next year, the basic law, our constitution, was a direct reaction to this sort of loss of any humanity that we had seen here, not only in Germany, but all over Europe due to us. So it was very reluctant. It had no military provisions at the beginning, for instance. Germany had no military, and obviously the Allies were not willing to grant us any form of military again.
Yes.
But that changed quite quickly, as you mentioned. We became a member of the NATO in 1955 already, and then, of course, were supposed to also help NATO being able to defend itself. So we got a military, we got armed forces, very small. But sort of the idea of Germany actually above that becoming a hard power, willing to force its interests onto other nations or states, was absolutely a no-go in Germany until the 90s, more or less, I would say. We didn't participate in any military actions, neither in NATO nor with the UN, until 1997, actually, or 1998 even. Actually, and that was interesting enough under a social democrat and a green new government, where we had our first extraterritorial military force actually used.
That is when Joschka Fischer was the foreign minister.
That is exactly when Joschka Fischer was foreign minister. And since, so we had great debates whether that was actually possible, whether we were, for instance, even allowed to actually help NATO by flying planes that were doing only research over other territory. We were sort of very reluctant in the 90s still, and in the beginning of the 2000s. And the same is true for actually the military as such. Nobody liked the military in Germany. Nobody liked to talk about the military in Germany. We didn't see the military in Germany. No uniforms were seen on the streets.
Yes.
And this has slowly changed and got a real boost now since the war against the Ukraine, definitely. Already a few years before that, the then Minister of Defense, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the unpronounceable name, she had introduced a rule that allowed soldiers in uniform to use trains without having to pay.
Yes.
So that already sort of led to the fact that we saw more people in uniform. And the whole idea was sort of to show that the uniform and the army isn't something separate from society, but it's part of society. Yeah. So that slowly changed. And now we have actually seen how necessary a military is.
Yes, yes.
The so-called Zeitenwende, the time change came up, the time change speech of Mr. Scholz, where he pronounced that we will put 100 billion euros into the military over the next few years. Yes. The now new defense minister is the most popular minister in Germany, Boris Pistorius. I know him personally, he's a great guy, but he became the most popular politician here in Germany within just a few weeks. And he's doing a great job in my view as well. So the way we see military and the way we see possible threats has completely changed. Because in 1989 and in 1990, so when the wall came down, we believed that the classical war is over.
Yes.
We believed that we might face terrorism, that we might face other threats, but no state would actually come up with the idea of forcing its armed forces onto another state.
And Putin changed all that.
And
Putin
Putin
changed
has
all
changed
that,
all that.
and the horrible aggression
Yes.
against Ukraine has changed all that. The very last question, and perhaps the most difficult one, does that mean that the EU, even though it's not a state, needs a European army, needs military muscle to defend its interests?
I would say yes, and I would say that it's quite common ground now when you talk to European politicians. We have first sort of elements of a European army, and of course, when you look at European integration history, actually, the Europäische Verteidigungsgemeinschaft, the European Defense Union, was actually thought about already in the 1950s.
One of the first projects
Was one of the first projects in the 1950s, and then it was the French that vetoed it
That's right.
in the end in their national parliament. Understandably, to be honest, they weren't willing sort of to share sovereignty with Germany at that point. But today it's quite common ground that we need something like that, and we should sort of bring our competences together, and we can see already the first steps of such a European army coming up. Of course, not yet a real European army. It's the national forces joining each other. But they are sort of cooperating very closely already. And I would say that in the next few years, we will probably see something like that. But I would still say that does not make the European Union a state. It'll make something new, sui generis, something very new, not seen in history yet, but still not a state. And I do think that we should sort of stop trying to always force these political organizations into something we know from history. Why does it actually have to become a state? Why can it not be something completely different, new, that we haven't known before, if it works? And it will work if we just stop thinking about it, what it looks like in the end.
Thank you very much, Professor Thiele. Thanks for your time. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me, and hope to see you soon, maybe in Hong Kong, and you as well. Bye.
Thank you.